You know that moment when you drive past someone's house and there's this absolutely gorgeous clematis vine wrapped around their arbor, dripping with flowers, and you think, I'm getting one of those? And then you do. And then, within a season or two, it's just gone? The frustrating part isn't that you killed it on purpose. It's that you have no idea what you actually did wrong. You planted it, watered it, maybe even fertilized it once or twice. By every measure, you did what you were supposed to do. But somewhere between mid-July and October, something shifted, and the plant just quietly gave up. Here's what nobody tells you when you're standing at the garden center holding that cell pack. Clematis fails in 5 very specific ways. Not because the plant is fragile, not because you lack a green thumb, but because almost every beginning gardener makes the same fundamental mistakes about how this plant actually wants to live. I'm James Scott, and on this channel we grow the plants that everyone says are too difficult. The ones that show up in gardening forums with people saying, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Today, I'm breaking down the 5 secrets that transform clematis from a temperamental annual into something that actually becomes more vigorous and reliable the less you fuss with it. By the end of this video, you'll understand why some people have clematis vines that are practically impossible to kill, while others can't keep them alive for more than 18 months. And more importantly, you'll know exactly which camp you want to join. Let's start with the foundation, because everything else builds on this. Secret 1. The depth principle nobody understands. Here's something that goes against every instinct you have as a gardener. When you plant most things, tomatoes, perennials, shrubs, nearly everything, the cardinal rule is the same. Dig a hole that matches the depth of the root ball. Set the plant in at that level and backfill. Match the nursery line to the ground line. It's universal advice, and it's right for almost every plant you'll ever grow. Clematis is the exception. It's the plant that breaks the rule, and the moment you understand why, you unlock something crucial about how it survives. When you plant clematis, you need to bury it deeper than feels rational. I'm talking about taking that plant out of its pot and setting it so that the first or second set of leaf nodes, those little joints and bumps along the stem where leaves emerge, ends up somewhere between 2 and 3 inches below the soil surface. You're deliberately burying part of the stem, part of the vine, the part you can see. It feels wrong, and that's the point. Here's why this works. Clematis has a survival mechanism that most other plants don't have. When you bury those nodes, you're not just covering them with soil, you're creating an underground insurance policy. Every one of those buried nodes has the potential to sprout completely new shoots. If something happens to the visible part of your plant, frost kills the tips, a lawnmower incident takes out the main growth, slugs strip the leaves, a storm snaps a cane, the plant doesn't die. It has backup buds sitting safely below ground, completely protected, ready to generate fresh growth. Think of it this way. A shallow planted clematis has one life. Once that above ground growth is compromised, it's done. A deeply planted clematis has 2 lives, the one you see and the one hiding underground. This becomes absolutely critical when clematis encounters wilt, which we'll get to later. A deeply planted plant can be cut all the way to ground level and will reliably regenerate from those protected buds. A shallow one doesn't get that second chance, it just disappears. So when you're planting, don't match the pot line. Go deeper. Feel that moment of resistance in your brain that says, that's too deep. That's you doing it right. Secret 2. Root shade, canopy light. You've definitely heard this before. Clematis likes its head in the sun and its feet in the shade. Most people hear it, nod, forget it immediately, and plant their clematis in whatever spot seems convenient. That's the mistake. This simple phrase is hiding something fundamental about how clematis actually functions. It's not poetic gardening advice. It's a description of the plant's physiology. And understanding it separates people who struggle with clematis from people who grow it effortlessly. The top of the plant, the vines, leaves, and flowers, genuinely does want full sun. I'm talking 6 hours minimum of direct light. That's where photosynthesis happens. That's where the energy for blooms comes from. There's no negotiation there, and plenty of light is non-negotiable for a good show. But the root system is living in a completely different world. Clematis roots hate heat and drought. When the soil around the base of your plant gets baked by sun, the roots stress. Moisture evaporates faster than the plant can absorb it. And when roots are stressed and dry, the plant starts making emergency decisions. Sacrificing leaves, dropping flowers, conserving energy just to survive. This is why you'll see clematis in hot, exposed locations that looks thin, pale, and disappointing, even though it's getting plenty of light. The top is fine, the roots are panicking. The solution is to keep the base of the plant shaded. You can do this with decorative mulch or shade cloth, but honestly, the method that actually works best is to plant something in front of your clematis. Something low, leafy, and permanent. A dwarf shrub, a sprawling geranium, a clump of hostas, even hardy ground covers. Basically, you're creating a living umbrella over the root zone. This shade planting accomplishes three things at once. First, it blocks direct sun from heating the soil. Second, the foliage of that shade plant acts like a mulch, keeping soil moisture from evaporating as quickly. Third, you get the bonus of having flowers or interesting foliage at ground level, so your clematis planting looks intentional instead of sparse. And here's what makes this strategy brilliant. Once the roots are cool and moist, clematis becomes dramatically more forgiving about water. You can skip watering for longer. You can go through dry spells without the plant panicking. You're not eliminating your need to water. You're building a buffer. You're making it so that when life gets busy in July and you don't get to the garden for 2 weeks, your clematis is sitting in cool soil with residual moisture, not cooking in direct sun. This is one of the reasons that monster vine growing up someone's fence and thriving on neglect is usually growing against a north-facing wall or behind something else, where the base stays shaded even if the top is climbing into full sun. Secret 3. Decode the pruning confusion. This is where most people's clematis story goes sideways. Clematis pruning terrifies gardeners more than almost any other plant task. And the reason it's so confusing is that there isn't one pruning rule. There are 3. Different clematis varieties follow different blooming patterns, and if you prune at the wrong time based on the wrong assumption, you'll cut off every single flower bud before it opens. The plant won't die, but you'll get a season of nothing but green leaves, and you'll think the plant is somehow broken when really you broke it with shears. Let me make this simple. Clematis falls into 3 pruning groups based on when and how it flowers. Understanding which group you have is the entire game. Group 1 clematis blooms early in spring on growth from the previous season. These are usually varieties like Clematis montana or early spring bloomers. With these plants, your job is basically hands-off. You lightly tidy up after they finish blooming, removing any obviously dead wood or spindly growth, but that's it. If you prune them hard in late winter, you're removing the exact growth that's supposed to flower in spring. You'll get a leafy plant and no blooms. So with Group 1, the rule is restraint. Let them grow. Group 2 clematis are usually the big, showy, early summer bloomers, with those enormous, decorative flowers. The double varieties often fall here. These are the divas of clematis, because they flower both on old growth from the previous year and on new growth from the current season. If you prune them too hard, you sacrifice the early flush of flowers. So with Group 2, you do a light spring pruning, maybe removing dead or obviously weak stems, maybe shortening stems that are out of bounds. But you're not hacking the plant down, you're tidying. And that approach gives you 2 separate blooms throughout the season. Group 3 clematis are the summer and late summer bloomers. They flower on completely new growth from the current season. With these varieties, you can be brutal. Every late winter or early spring, you cut the entire plant down to about 1 to 2 feet above the ground. It sounds violent, it looks dramatic, and the plant comes absolutely roaring back. Because it's blooming on brand new stems, you can't mess this up. Cut it short, and you get a more compact plant with flowers lower on the stems and better air circulation. So what do you do if you don't know which group you have? Option 1. Check the plant tag, or figure out when it blooms. That timing tells you almost everything. Spring blooms equal Group 1. Early summer blooms equal Group 2. Summer or late summer blooms equal Group 3. Option 2. And this is your safety net. Do nothing for the first full year. Just watch the plant. Observe when it flowers. See how it grows. A clematis that's never pruned won't die. It might get a little overgrown or tangled, but it'll still flower. A clematis pruned at the wrong time of year will skip an entire season of blooms. So if you're uncertain, put the shears down. Observation is always smarter than a guess with pruning. Secret 4. The wilt recovery that changes everything. This is the one. This is the secret that separates people who grow clematis for decades from people who tried it once, watched it die, and never looked back. Clematis wilt is real. It's dramatic. It's heartbreaking. And almost every gardener who experiences it makes the same fatal mistake. Here's how it unfolds. Your clematis is doing well. It's growing, climbing, the foliage looks healthy, maybe it's about to flower, or already is. You go out one morning and something shocking has happened. A whole stem, or sometimes the entire visible plant, has collapsed. The stems look blackened, the leaves are wilted, the whole thing looks dead, and it happened overnight. No warning signs. Just instant crisis. That's clematis wilt. It's caused by a fungus that attacks the stem tissue, and it's one of the most shocking plant failures you can witness. The speed of it is what gets most people. One day, fine. The next day, crisis. Here's what almost every gardener does. They panic. They assume the plant is dead. They dig it out, they throw it away, they tell everyone clematis is too difficult, and they never try again. Here's what I need you to know. That plant is almost certainly not dead. Clematis wilt attacks the visible part of the plant, the stems and foliage above ground, but it almost never kills the root system. And if you plant it deep, like we talked about earlier, you have living buds sitting safely underground, completely untouched by the fungus. The roots are fine. So instead of panicking, you do something that feels insane. You cut the entire collapsed plant down to ground level. You remove all that wilted, damaged material, and don't compost it where spores might spread. You get it away from the plant entirely. Then you do something really simple. You keep the soil around the base consistently moist, you keep those roots cool with shade planting, and you wait. In the vast majority of cases, within 2 to 4 weeks, you'll see new green shoots pushing up from the base. Fresh, clean growth emerging from those protected underground buds. The plant is resetting itself. It's generating completely new stems from the root system, and those new stems are fungus-free because they're coming from underground. Many clematis go through wilt once or twice in their first couple of years, and then something remarkable happens. As the root system matures and becomes more established, the plant simply stops doing it. The stress that triggered the wilt diminishes, the plant gets stronger, and suddenly you have a clematis that's nearly bulletproof. So the real secret isn't preventing wilt. Most gardeners can't, honestly. The real secret is knowing what to do when it happens. Panic and toss the plant, and you lose. Cut it down and wait, and you get a vine that lives for 30 or 40 years. This one piece of knowledge is the difference between killing clematis and being someone who actually can't kill it. Secret 5. Feeding for survival, not just flowers. The last piece is about building resilience and staying power. The difference between a clematis that merely survives and a clematis that becomes that legendary monster vine covering the fence. Most clematis gardeners fall into one of two camps. Either they never feed the plant, figuring that soil has nutrients and the plant should just adapt, or they occasionally remember to dump whatever generic plant food is in the shed on the soil and hope for the best. Both approaches give you a plant that technically stays alive, but it's never vigorous. It's never impressive. It doesn't have the reserves to shrug off neglect or weather stress. It's more like a plant existing than a plant thriving. Here's what clematis actually wants. It's a heavy feeder. It has a big appetite, but it doesn't want a constant drip of nitrogen. Let me explain why that distinction matters. Nitrogen, the N, in fertilizer, pushes leafy, green, vegetative growth. If you overfeed nitrogen, you end up with a massive wall of foliage and almost no flowers. It's a healthy-looking plant that simply refuses to bloom. It's pretty from a distance and completely useless as a flowering specimen. What clematis wants for flowers is potassium and phosphorus. Those nutrients shift the plant's energy from making leaves toward making blooms. It's a different kind of feeding strategy entirely. So here's the rhythm that actually works. In early spring, as the plant is waking up from dormancy, work a generous handful or two of compost or well-rotted manure into the soil around the base of the plant. Don't just sprinkle it on top and hope it rains. Work it into the top inch or two of soil. This is your slow, steady foundation. The compost breaks down gradually throughout the season, feeding the roots continuously at a measured pace. Then, as the plant approaches its blooming season, so late spring for Group 1 and 2 varieties, early summer for Group 3, switch over to a feed that's higher in potassium and phosphorus. A rose food or tomato food works beautifully. Both are formulated exactly for this, pushing flowering production rather than vegetative growth. Use that higher phosphorus feed right as bloom time is approaching. That's the fuel for the explosion of flowers. You're not feeding heavily throughout the season. You're strategic. You're feeding at the moment the plant needs that energy directed toward flowers. Once the plant is actively blooming hard, ease off. Let it do its thing. You don't want to feed during peak bloom because you don't need to. The plant is already flowering. Heavy feeding at that point just pushes more foliage when what you want is blooms. And here's the part that connects this to everything else in this video. A well-fed clematis with a robust root system is an absolutely forgiving clematis. The energy stored in those roots is exactly what lets the plant survive when you forget to water for 2 weeks, when wilt strikes, when winter hits particularly hard, when you completely ignore it for a month because life gets busy. You're not just feeding it for prettier flowers, you're building a reserve tank. You're creating a plant with enough stored energy and vigor that it can handle neglect, stress, and setbacks. Feed the roots, and the roots will carry the plant through almost anything you throw at it, including your own absence. These 5 secrets aren't really 5 separate tips sitting in isolation. They're one integrated strategy. You plant deep, so the plant always has a backup escape route when the visible growth gets damaged. You keep the root zone shaded and cool while the canopy reaches for sun, so the plant doesn't spend energy trying to survive heat stress. You understand the pruning groups, so you're not accidentally cutting off the growth that's supposed to flower. You know that wilt isn't a death sentence, but an opportunity for the plant to reset itself. And you feed strategically, so the plant builds the reserves needed to handle whatever gets thrown at it. Do all 5 things, and you're not growing a clematis that merely survives. You're growing one that actually becomes more vigorous and reliable, the less attention you pay to it. Now, if this shifted how you think about this plant, I have one thing I want you to do. Hit that subscribe button. This channel is built entirely around plants that have bad reputations, the ones everyone says are impossible or fussy, when they're really just misunderstood. We dig deep into one plant every single week, and I pull from years of growing experience and current horticultural research to give you the actual reasons things fail and how to prevent it. And here's something else. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever had a clematis collapse from wilt and thought it was dead, only to learn later it might have come back? Or do you have one of those monster vines that just keeps getting bigger and more aggressive no matter what you do? Do you have a clematis success story, or has it been a frustration? I genuinely read every comment that comes through, and the stories people share end up directing which plants I cover next. Your experience shapes this channel. Go find a clematis. Plant it deeper than feels right. Give its roots some shade, watch it bloom. And when, not if, but when, something stresses it out, remember that the plant is likely tougher than you think. Plant deep, shade the roots. Leave it alone if you're not sure about pruning. Don't panic when wilt hits. Feed it for survival. Do those 5 things, and you'll have a clematis that thrives on your neglect.